Thank you very much. Thank you, Schengen. It's good to be at IFPRI. This is a terrific report. Let me say, Schengen, on behalf of the World Resource Institute, we deeply appreciate our friendship and our partnership with you. In all of my incarnations, whether at the World Bank, the British government, now at the World Resource Institute, I like to come here for the best knowledge, the best analysis, and this report continues in that tradition. So thank you very much. This does have a very different, for those of us that sat in the Rome Crisis Food Summit, 4 or 5 years ago, this report has a very different tone. I mean, we've come a long way. In some ways, the three of you sitting there, Schengen representing serious analysis and moving forward the intellectual debate, Michael representing those that hold people accountable for delivery, and Mary representing the United States, which has played an extremely important role. I mean, you guys represent actually a lot of progress. I mean, the degree of effort that's going in worldwide now on agriculture is altogether different. The tone is altogether different, even though Schengen sort of rightly was caveating sort of what he was saying. And at the end of the day, this report is actually, this says total factor productivity is actually increasing more than we really, certainly more than it used to. The idea that we are in any sense in a crisis is not there. Of course, there are worries. So, I mean, this is good news, and we ought to rejoice in it. Now, you can imagine that coming from the World Resources Institute, that we worry about sort of resources, their scarcity, and so on. We take issues of the future very seriously, and this report is mainly about this year, but you do have a chapter on projecting into the future. So I just wanted to say a word on that. I mean, 2012 was an extremely important year in terms of perceptions on climate change, as you said. During the year, we sort of really crept in to the belief that the 2 degrees is going to be pretty much impossible. And tragically, around the world, people are now sort of accepting that probably 3 degrees, 4 degrees, even I see some friends from the World Bank, even the stuffy old World Bank, where I've spent a lot of my career, and they're not stuffy at all, of course, but even they are now saying that it's a 4-degree world out there. Well, if true, I don't think anymore we can really do projections without referring to it. Now, in last year's report, you had a whole chapter on climate change, so it's not fair of me to grumble about your report, but just a little bit. I mean, I do think that when you get over 2 degrees, as your research has shown, and you're one of the best groups in the world working on agriculture and climate change, that the game does change. And whilst up to 2 degrees, actually, maybe agriculture might benefit, once you get up to 5 degrees, you're in pretty serious trouble. And of course, that's only the temperature side of things. I mean, more serious is actually water and shifts in the hydrological cycle. We've just brought out an incredible water risk tool. It's called Aqueduct. And essentially what it does, it has 15,000 hours of serious analysis embedded in it. What it does for the 15,000 watersheds in the world, it sort of models water, and then it allows a projection capacity based upon IPCC and assumptions of demand on growth of population. Right? When you actually overlay that, Michael mentioned energy, you overlay it on the energy sources. And if you're running the China energy system, you get worried, not only because of hydroelectricity, but where shale gas is and where even coal-powered plants are, which use a lot of water. That's energy. But lay it over agriculture, you also start getting some pretty worrying stories, even in the irrigated areas of East Asia, but especially obviously in areas that are rain-fed. So I think we do need to keep this agenda sort of higher on our agenda. Now, the World Resources Institute has not really had food as a theme. We do land, we do forests, we do water. But now we are having to take food. We are creating a food program. And this year's World Resources Report, and it's been great working with your team, by the way, and learning so much. The World Resources Report that's going to be coming out in parts over the next 12 months is on food futures. And basically the 9.3 billion that we have to feed by 2030. 50, and that requires just calories to go up by 64%, and then all the things that you talk about in terms of changing consumption patterns. Now already greenhouse gases, agriculture accounts for 13% directly, and another 4%, another 10% in terms of land use change. So you're up to a quarter of all greenhouse gases come from what we're talking about today. If you look at just the narrow amount, that's the 13%, you're currently about 6.5 gigatons coming from agriculture. Even on a pretty optimistic level to feed the world, you're going to be emitting maybe 9.5 gigatons, we think. And then if you add even a cut back emission from land use change, you're up to 15 gigatons. Well, by 2050, the total allowable amount of greenhouse gases is 21 gigatons. So in other words, you're up to 15 out of 21 just from agriculture. Forget all the other aspects. So you're running up to some pretty serious budget constraints here. And we need to sort of really think hard about how that, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to show how can you have the best of the sort of wriggle through this balancing act. And one vital element, it was so good that you raised it, is influencing consumption patterns. I mean, I think everybody sort of knows the numbers, but basically, if you eat beef, you only get sort of 1% of the calories that the beef has eaten. And you get about 4% of the protein that the beef has eaten. Now in the United States, a little bit hard, it's 2%, so a little bit higher, 2%, 7%. But this is not good value if you're short of protein. And so clearly there's some, and then on top of that, ruminants account for 6% of all greenhouse gases that humans produce. So, that's just today. You imagine how much worse it's going to get. So we look forward to working really closely with you on these issues, and we look to you as having really strong economic capacity. Just one final word. It was really nice that you dealt with the emergence of the sort of green growth or green economy theme, and that was a big theme in 2012. I mean, quite frankly, we all tried our hardest at Rio. We all tried to make it a success. I'm not saying it was a failure. I think there were good things came out of it, the private sector, as you say, and so on. But, we certainly didn't get the boost that we hoped. Now, so it's a nice chapter you've got on green growth. The really interesting thing about the green growth hypothesis is really there are two contestable propositions in green growth. One is that actually out there are things that we could do that are good to make things greener, but actually they're in our own economic interest anyway. So in other words, it's sort of below the zero line in the marginal abatement cost curve. That's proposition one, that there's a lot of $100 bills out there that actually aren't being picked up, but the fact that we're now worried about the environment might make us more likely to pick them up. So that's proposition one. And in agriculture, that's a very interesting hypothesis, and it hasn't really been looked at in enough detail. The second hypothesis is a more interesting one, which is sort of the Porter hypothesis, which says that putting smart environmental regulations or policies, whether it's on agriculture or whatever, such as you're not allowed to expand your area, or you have to use less this chemical or that chemical, actually can promote technological change, higher investment, higher jobs, and so on. The jury is totally out on that. World Bank did a very good report last year on green growth, looked at it. Lots of us are looking at it, and we don't know. In agriculture, though, I suspect there are some really interesting things here. So I think we need to go deeper in this sort of green growth. I mean, it can be very sort of mushy as a theme, and we need to actually say, what does it mean? Can we test this hypothesis? And it may well be that those two hypotheses are right, in which case you could get some really interesting things happening in the coming years as countries start realizing, my goodness, we're emitting all this greenhouse gases, we've got to make progress. And so anyway, look, thank you. This was really a good read, and I urge everyone who hasn't read it to read every word. Thank you.